Hello and welcome to Shadow of the Cast, a Marvel Champions podcast. I'm VillainTheory,
And I'm Nelson.
and today we're talking about the new heroes Angel and Psylocke, as well as answering community questions at the end.
Yeah, I'm excited. These are two pretty cool heroes, and so I'm excited to dive into them. But I guess people kind of know, well, not necessarily. Villain, where are you found?
Well, I can be found on YouTube under the name VillainTheory. A lot of you guys are probably listening to this here, but if you're not, I make kind of videos, a little bit analytical, all different things, and also on Marvel CDB, the fan website, where you can build decks.
Nice. And I also have YouTube at Nelson All Over Cards. That's where you can find me. So, to start us out, Villain, what is your favorite and least favorite thing about Angel?
Ooh, that's a good question. So Angel is a character that has surprised me. I like him more than I expected, and we'll probably get into that. What is my favorite thing about him? It's got to be, and this might take away from another question later, maybe, that we did with, we talked about Cable and Psylocke, but I'm going to go for my favorite card. That is my favorite thing about him. I love avian anatomy. I love
Okay.
just bouncing cards back. I feel like that's really fun. I guess what I really like is bouncing the card back to like maybe combo off his double hero abilities, because he's got two hero forms. If you are not aware of him, he has sort of an angel form and an archangel form, each with their own response. And yeah, I just love bouncing an aerial event back with avian anatomy, which returns one to your hand that you play with it, and then you can combo on the other side. I like that puzzle of trying to work that out. So that's probably my favorite thing. Hopefully that makes sense. That's kind of a couple of things
Yeah,
combined, but
I
that is
especially
similar.
love doing it in Angel form, where you avian anatomy, you pay, you bounce the card back, and you play an aerial event. You get to draw a card in Angel form, and so now, like, if you're not running that much of a deficit in cards, and there's still a lot of options available to them. But yeah, that's a really cool resource card.
Yeah, that whole little sequencing bit involving that card is kind of my favorite bit. Is that even my favorite card, though? Actually, maybe not, but that's what I'm going with. There's a lot of good to talk about there. My least favorite thing about Angel is actually going to be the team-up card. And this might sound really petty, but it says Angel and Psylocke on the team-up card. What if I'm
Oh,
Archangel?
yeah, that's
I've had
true.
we've had problems where I've been Archangel and like my partner who's played Psylocke has been, wanting to play it, but I'm in the wrong form. Well, then I've been wanting to play it and I've been able to flip to Angel, but then they're alter ego. So it's been a little bit tricky. It's still a cool card though. But yeah, that's what I've got. What about you, Nelson?
Ooh, I like is it Metamorphosis? The form
Yes.
changing card, where it's a
Mm,
2-cost aerial event. You get to switch to your form, and then if you're an Archangel, deal 3 damage. Angel removes you threat. Warren, his alter ego, you get to draw a card. But there's a response on both the Angel and the Archangel side that says after you play an aerial event, you get to deal damage equal to the cost on Archangel, which is crazy, or draw a card in Angel, which is also really cool. And so
yep.
if you flip to Angel, you get to remove 2 threat, draw a card, and there's just a lot that's going on with the sequencing of flipping, and he can flip so many times in a round that it gets a little crazy. And so that's probably my favorite thing. I think my least favorite thing is my card doesn't lay flat. I when it's folded. No,
Honestly,
but
that's a great one. I have that too. I genuinely have that. I was thinking that yesterday playing him last night.
does your Ant-Man and Wasp do that? Because I don't think my Ant-Man and Wasp do that. I think they lay flat.
I think they lay flat, but in their defense, or in defense of Angel, they have been like squished in my collection flat. Angel and
That's fair. That's fair.
Wasp and Ant-Man.
That's very, very fair. Yeah. Probably my biggest complaint about Angel would be I struggled with Angel. I've played probably now about 25 to 30 games with him, and he started to click. But I do think that he has a little bit higher of a skill curve than I was expecting him to, with kind of his abilities being really powerful. I was expecting him to be a little bit easier to pilot. Haha, pilot aerial. There you go. Nice. Um, but he's actually pretty complex, which probably turns into one of the things I like more about him. But I was kind of surprised at how tricky he could be.
Yeah, I like both of those points. After I finished saying what my favorite thing was, and I was then like, wait, metamorphosis exists. Hold on. Because actually, I also really, really love that card and the sequencing that comes from that. I guess that is my other favorite thing about him as well. So I think that's an amazing point. I'm really glad you brought that up. My Angel identity card, no, it does not lay flat. If I'm on Angel's side, he's starting to take off. But yeah, really interesting points there. That I think Angel is more complicated than I expected as well. I thought it's going to be pretty straightforward. You're on one hero side, you trigger his response, flip to the other side, play another aerial event, trigger that response. Just rinse and repeat. But a lot of interesting choices, especially with things like adaptive plumage, which do different things on different sides. Metamorphosis is definitely the key one. You can go from a normal turn or a slightly difficult turn to, a galaxy brain 4D, 5D chess. If I pay for, that with avian anatomy, I've had turns where I've played metamorphosis like 3 times in one turn, I think.
Wow. Yeah.
Which is a lot of things happening in different forms. Especially, I don't think it was that game, but I have run him, with the form changing cards. So you can have a lot of crazy stuff going on.
Oh, that's interesting. The form changing cards. I have only tried Perseverance, which is the green one where whenever you change forms, you get a tough status card. And I think that they work fairly well. There aren't, I guess Metamorphosis is a card that allows you to flip. I'm thinking more like Ant-Man, who has his resize ability, which is a 0 cost. Actually, it's like a 0 effective resource cost because it draws you a card, you get that card back. And I felt like that was a little bit easier to play the form changes, but like how is the form changing cards, the surprise attacks, the lay down the laws, how have those interacted with Angel for you?
So I've not used lay down the laws too much. I'll tell you what I found about Angel is he has so much forwarding, like between the agile flight and I think it's called yawn roll. We did a 3-player game last night with Angel Injustice, and we didn't bother to lay down the law or anything. We just had agile flight and yawn roll, and we were putting a lot of threat out. We actually got quite a few side schemes, but he just decimated it. I've used surprise attack quite a bit, and he actually has a lot of physicals. He has a majority physicals in his deck. I think he's got 6, whereas he's got like I think 3 mentals and 3 energies. So he can hit these kicker on surprise attack quite a lot. And I don't know if you've tried him in Rush. I've not done it intentionally, but he can win games very quickly.
Yeah, I've unintentionally rushed a couple of games. Yes.
Yeah,
because you throw dive bomb in there. Dive bomb is hitting for 7 plus 4. Yeah, so it's 11. And I guess that's another question is, have you run him with honed technique?
I have looked a little bit into it. I think I played a game early on with it, but I find it really awkward with him. I think because he doesn't really have those mental resources. He does have a couple of wilds, but it's just tricky, and he wants to be playing, a couple of cards every turn already, and he has so much damage. I do think if you go up to 4-player, dive bomb home technique, maybe it's worth it, but I've just not found it necessary whatsoever at 1 and even 2-player. I mean, I do normally run home technique, semi-regularly in 2-player. I just don't find it necessary.
That's exactly what I had found. I tried taking him up against not risky, but mutagen formula. So lot going at you, and I ended up trying it against a couple other villains as well, but I cut hone technique. It's just like it's too much damage that Angel just doesn't necessarily need that extra damage. And dive bomb, I forgot who pointed this out. I think it was on his stream that Angel really only wants to run dive bomb, and that's the only good target for hone technique in that deck because it only applies to aggression events, not his signature events, and his signature events are pretty good. And so I was just kind of curious. I wanted to get your take on that because I tried it and it was awkward, like you were saying. I couldn't get the kickers. I wasn't able to grab the dive bombs at the right time. When I did, it was awesome. I did 16 damage with 4. It was like cool, but it was like it was a lot of setup, and I feel like he just doesn't need it.
I feel like there are some combos. I think there's maybe you could do like 2-player with Cable, build support, get Quinn Carrier in as Angel, and then you're kind of good to go. And Worthington Industries can shuffle dive bomb back in, so you can do some cool stuff. But yeah, I'd be really interested to know what you guys as listeners have found with Angel. Have you tried him with hone technique, and how has that gone? If you want to leave a comment anywhere or email in, I'd be really interested.
Nice. Do you have a favorite aspect with Angel?
You know what? I thought about this before we started recording, and I'm still thinking about it now. Angel, I think, is really, really good in every aspect. I've really struggled to say, oh, I think this is his best aspect. I think there's an element of leadership being leadership. He does have some stuff there. And I do think in solo play, I think Justice is maybe too much threat removal. I don't think
Yeah.
he.
Yeah.
Uh, in multiplayer though, I love Justice Angel, but I don't think solo. I just doesn't appeal to me compared to the other ones now. So I'm gonna softly, and you're gonna probably like this. I'm gonna softly throw out protection, but it's only very
Let's
softly. I think.
go.
What about you?
So favorite, I really enjoyed leadership. Like just it was really good, but we got this new ally called Cannonball, who actually I played him against Project Wide Awake and drew Cannonball and was very sad about that. I actually don't know the ruling. I guess you can have two cannonballs in your deck on under that situation. Not 100% sure. But
Yeah, I think he can get added to your deck, but you obviously can't have them
you
both
can't
in
bring them.
play.
Yeah. So like Cannonball is a 3 cost ally 2/2/2, 2 consequential damage on each one of his activations, but you reduce the amount of consequential damage he takes for each aerial card you have in your hand, which, if you're playing Angel, is probably a lot. So he is usually taking 0, maybe 1 consequential damage on each one of those activations. And then you just Voltron him. You just throw a ton of attachments on him and just let him soar. But I thought that was really fun. The other thing that we ran, and I didn't do that one on stream. That was an off stream game. But the one I did on stream was running like air supremacy and all the leadership events, and found that it was actually fairly decent. Like I've always just kind of discounted air supremacy as a card that I don't need to play that. The 2 cost card, exhaust some aerial and or deal damage equal to the number of aerial. And now you have a lot of aerial cards on the table, and so you can start hitting that efficiency curve and dealing enough damage that it makes worth running. So I really enjoyed leadership, which is not something you'll hear me say very, very frequently.
Oh, I will. I will corrupt you into leadership. I think I think it's funny you've said leadership and I've said protection. It should be the other way around.
Yeah.
um, I just like, I think Ever Vigilant is such a good card, so flexible. And I think that's really what tips it for me. And you've got the more aerial allies there. You've got like Starhawk, the new one, Warpath. There's a lot of good stuff, but I do like the Air Supremacy, and I think that is a generally underrated card. I'm guessing that was a solo game because Air Supremacy in multiplayer gets really good when there's a lot more targets for it.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it was definitely a solo game. It was definitely a solo game.
If you ever get into like a 3 or 4 player Angel game with Air Supremacy, I've even ran Pixie in Angel just
Hmm.
for Air Supremacy, just to have a cheap ally to trigger that kind of thing. Yeah, so we're opposite aspects in terms of favorite.
Yeah, no. So I have a question. I have heard some rumors online or some talks online that Angel could be one of the more powerful heroes in the game. I don't think that I fall with a top 5 hero. What are your thoughts? Where do you think Angel lies in the power level?
So I'm going to preface this with saying when we were talking about Cable and Domino in the previous video, they had been out longer than Angel and Psylocke have. So I am not fully settled, and I wasn't even fully settled on those, but I'm not fully settled on where Angel lands. But I will say, I do think he's extremely powerful. Do I think he's top 5? Not sure. Do I think he's top 15? Absolutely. Do I think he's top 10? Honestly, almost definitely. But I'm not 100% set, but I just think he has a lot going for him. He has, threat removal is typically at, a premium, or it's hard to find in Marvel Champions compared to damage. But he has 6 threat removal cards, and he has basically his own arc reactors. He can ready up and just fall again. So that kind of, in terms of solo play, that covers that. But even in multiplayer, you can flex into threat removal when you need to, whenever. He has more damage than he knows what to do with sometimes. That
That's
Archangel
true.
response is everything. But he's also got, 12 hit points, extra healing, especially if you use Metamorphosis to take it, an extra stop in Alter Ego. He's got a really good defense card, I think. Loads of card draw, lots of resource generation. He's got the Power of Flight resource generator. I struggle to name a weakness for him, and that puts him in a very good position. I think he's very, very good. I'm not exactly sure if I'd say top 5 or not, but I'm not sure I wouldn't say that. So yeah,
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty high up on Archangel and Angel's Power right now.
Yeah. I owe a couple more games to figure out exactly where he lands. I was thinking around like that 10 to 15 slot. And I think a lot of that comes in with just the skill curve with him, because I do think that he can do some truly incredible things. I think it's not inherently obvious on how to do that, which maybe is not fair, but I do give some weight to skill in my rankings of them. That if yeah, that's interesting. But he can do a lot of damage. He can do rush. That's kind of the area that I think I need to explore a little bit more before I do a review on Angel. Is how effectively can he rush? Because I think it's a little crazy how cool or how quickly he can rush.
What about if we were to talk about Psylocke? Because I think people are going to
Ooh,
want to hear about her. So
yeah.
I'm going to ask you, what is your favorite and least favorite thing about Psylocke?
Mm, okay. The least favorite thing I'm going to start with is the forehand size, which I understand why. I mean, she starts the table, she starts with two resource generators on the table, and I think that's incredibly good. So it balances out with, having the forehand size. It's kind of like the SPDR mold, the spider mold, where you low hand size but resource generators on the table. But that being said, I am really enjoying Psylocke. I like the resource generators. I think it's really cool because you can flip those knives to katanas. You get +1 thwart when they're in the knife side, +1 attack when they're katana side. You can exhaust them to generate either a mental or a physical resource. And the balance of flipping those when you want to have 3 thwart, when you want to have 3 attack, when you want to have an attack with piercing because that villain has tough, it's been fairly easy, not necessarily simple, but it's been fairly easy to plan to have those weapons in the correct form to do what you need to do. And I've really enjoyed that puzzle and trying to figure out, okay, let's keep them in the knives. I want to run scimitar, which is a restricted, and like I think one of the important points to think about is that the knives are not restricted, but the katanas are restricted. You are limited to 2 restricted cards on the table at a time. So if you have the katanas out, you cannot have another restricted. But then I run side holster to have that third spot, just so I have the flexibility. It's been a lot of fun to try and just like sequence and make sure that I have the thwart when I need it, flip into, and then like hit the villain with the 3 attack. I've been enjoying the sequencing there a lot.
Yeah, I really like the sequencing. I like the puzzle. She has surprised me in a good way with all of that. So I'm gonna say that's probably my favorite thing. I mean, I think that came across with Angel, but I like interesting sequencing puzzles, and Psylocke is everything about that. It
Yeah.
is easy to change most of the time to what you need, but there are times where you're trying to make different things come together, or you end up getting card drawn, like, oh, now I need to try and maybe change this over. So I find that really fascinating, and I've really enjoyed that. In terms of least favorite, I'm gonna cheat. We're gonna have two small least favorite things.
Okay. Okay.
This is gonna sound really petty, but it slightly bothers me that almost all of her cards are basically, named psychic thing. It's it's like I get not really confused, but they all kind of blur into one in terms of the names. At this point, I just look at the pictures because maybe it's because I've been playing Cable a lot as well, who's a lot of telepathic and telekinetic, uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
a mind, all these words going around. That's a very, very small, minor gripe, which puts Solak in quite a good position. I thought that you mentioning the forehand size was interesting. I don't think that's been a problem I've had in terms of making it, disliking it. Is something I've had to play around, but that's interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good point. And the other problem I have, which you actually kind of touched upon inadvertently, is I actually don't like that the side katanas are restricted. I
But the
find,
knives aren't.
yeah, I find, they introduce scimitar, and it's interesting that there's now a puzzle on how to make that work. But for me, I kind of just wish it wasn't there, because I feel like it just restricts the freedom a bit, but not in a way that's pushing me to be more creative. It's just pushing me to run a side holster, really. Yeah.
And like it wouldn't be an issue. Like you could play around with it, but our obligation forces you to switch into katanas,
Hmm.
which would then require you to discard any other restricted card because those are permanent and you have to discard your non-permanent restricted cards. And so like if the obligation did something different, then I think there would be more interesting builds out there where you're not just running side holster to get scimitar out there. But yeah, I think that that's an interesting point. The one thing that I just remembered, and I'm gonna modify or add a second favorite thing, and hopefully I want to pick your brain on this one. Training Regiment, I think, is a really cool card. This is her one cost support card where we can exhaust it, search your deck for a skill card, and add it to your hand. Then, if you're in hero form, you have to discard a card. But that opens up a lot of really interesting builds. And I want to pick the deck builder's brain on what do you think about Training Regiment?
I love Training Regimen, but I think it's actually in a weird place where a lot of traditional, archetypes and deck styles don't run that many skill cards for it. So you kind of want to try and build into it a bit, but a lot of builds that synergize with her don't have a lot of skills in. But then, because of this Training Regimen, you kind of want to get some extra ones in my opinion. So I think that's been interesting, but it's not been overwhelming. I have run her with decks that do not have any extra skills in, and it's still gone completely fine. But I will say my favorite decks for her definitely have. And my favorite deck for her so far has been, by a landslide, Repurpose, which is a skill.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So many cards are skills that I just glossed over until this card came out. But, ooh, okay. Okay. Tell me about this Repurpose deck.
So Psylocke has a lot of resources. Sometimes, if you're building all the power of the mind and that in there, maybe too many. But at the same time, what repurposed decks are like are the ability to set up a lot of tech while maintaining control of the board. And her money really lets you set that up. So I'm running, I think my standard has been so far 3 energy barriers, 2 force field generators, and 1 electrostatic armor, because that is also a tech card. I think some people sometimes
Yeah.
forget that, but it's a nice little cheap option. And if you ever draw into a repurpose, you just use Training Regimen and get another repurpose, and you have multiple repurpose turns super easy, and those bonuses stack. So, what repurpose does, if you are not aware, it discards a tech card you have out and adds the cost to either your attack or thwarting stat. So I can repurpose Energy Barrier and get +2 to my attack, and it also readies you up. So I can attack for 3, repurpose Energy Barrier, attack for 5, repurpose, I don't know, another Energy Barrier, attack for 7, which is just really good. It's kind of burst damage on demand. And I've actually been running, what's the name of it? Defensive Training? The protection
Yeah.
card that lets you shuffle an event back into your deck
That's cool.
to replenish the repurposes. So
That's
that's been
really
really
cool.
fun.
Nice. Yeah, I've really enjoyed what I did not enjoy with Angel, and that's her Hone Technique build. Hone Technique is a skill, and one of the things that Hone Technique can fall subject to is if Hone Technique is on the bottom of your deck, that can be an issue. Now you have another way to grab Hone Technique, get it into play earlier, which you can do very easily. Hit that mental requirement because her knives generate a mental resource. She can lean into aggression for the damage. I typically am leaning and keeping her knives out so she can basic activate and take care of the thwart, and then Hone Technique, hit the kickers, and just zoom. That's been my favorite build with her, which utilizes like that Training Regiment card. But there's so many skills out there that I'm like, ooh, let's try this one.
Yeah, that's some really good skills for. I think making an entrance is another good one, but I
Yeah.
like that you brought up honed technique. So yesterday in that game where we had my friend was playing Angel Injustice that I was talking about, but my partner was playing Psylocke with honed technique in that same game. So that was really good. I got to see a lot of
Nice.
honed technique shenanigans with Psylocke there. And I was actually playing Cable with in Uncanny X-Force on some of those new allies.
Oh,
So that
cool.
was fun. Um, but yeah, the hone technique I think is really fun for Psylocke. I think she's a bit like Angel. She has really ridiculously good builds in every aspect, in my opinion. Talking about protection again, which I got to go back to. Have you tried her with Cerebro and Karma?
Yes. Oh, not Karma. I've played her with Cerebro because she can, in Alter Ego, always exhaust one of her weapon upgrades to shuffle a psionic card back in, and I've done that with Professor X. So I've X Cerebro pulled X because you can search your entire deck and then have a confuse every single time you roll down. And so like in a solo game which is the majority of games that I play, a lot of the times the scary part of rolling down is confuse, which she has a lot of confuse in her kit, which is another selling point for Psylocke. But getting Professor X, or maybe even on that turn that I'm rolling up, so I have the blocker. I've done that, but I have not tried it with Karma. That sounds fun.
Karma and Cerebro are pretty broken in my opinion, as in kind of game breaking. And it's not like she's instantly flying up to absolute S tier or anything like that for me. It's not like, oh, she's, overthrown Doctor Strange, but it is such a good combo. So I have mostly played her at two player, a little bit solo, and this was still useful there. But just in multiplayer, when you have more chance of minions to
Yeah,
be out, Karma is because she's Sonic. You can use, like you say, exhaust one of her Sonic weapons, put Karma back in your deck, then just Cerebro her. You have her on demand, so you're just mind controlling someone, potentially every turn as long as there's a minion. And that's basically defeating that minion, and then you've got two blockers there for people, and you can probably use that minion for at least one attack. So now
that's
become an
cool.
ally. It's so ridiculously good, and so is Professor X. I feel like we're just talking about cool deck builds at this point, but I feel like this kind of showcases one of Psylocke's strengths, which is she has some really, really fun decks and
Yeah,
interactions. What
yeah,
I like about Professor X, I did a build in leadership that was all about Sonic Kicker, and this is probably too much for solo, but since you never really use Professor X's second consequential damage, you just Psychic Kicker him kind of for free. So you play him, he forwards for free. Psychic Kicker him, he's forwarding for 5. So in two player at least, threat is basically completely solved by Psylocke having Cerebro and Professor X. It's just that's even before her own. She like Angel, she has a lot of forwarding. She can get free basic forward, and she has free very powerful forwarding events, which she can shuffle back into her deck. So a lot of cool combos with Psylocke.
a lot of cool combos. So she is her gimmick, I guess, gimmick in quotes there. She has a lot of confuse in her kit, which is, I think, at least in solo, a incredibly powerful mechanic to play around with. Have you taken her up or played her against any of these stalwart villains that we have who cannot be confused?
Yeah, I have done a game against Thanos, and what I found really interesting is that pre-release I heard some talk that she was going to be absolutely, destroyed by, Stalwart. Stalwart was going to be a problem, but I haven't found that whatsoever. I do think it hurts her in terms of having less confuse available, but I think what's amazing about her events is that if your psi weapons are on the right side, you're still getting the full benefit. A lot of characters, when they play an attack with a stun or confuse on against Stalwart, they just lose that part of it completely. But she has an alternative, which has been really, really fun. So Flurry of Blades, you miss the confuse, but at least you get 2 damage for your troubles. Really, I haven't found it too bad. She takes a hit there, but I still find her pretty good, in all honesty.
Yeah, I ran her against a Thanos game on stream, and I think she would have pulled it out, but Thanos did the Thanos thing where he placed like 14 threat on the main, and I lost in one turn. But
Oh,
like, which would have happened to any hero who rolled down that sequencing of cards would have had the same issue. But I took her up against Master Mold. She made easy work of Master Mold. I'm in the same boat that you are. That she is not as hindered by stalwart villains, because if you're playing the Fury of Blades and you get that confused, if you just use the resource on your knife to flip it into katana before you play Fury of Blades, now you're not doing the confuse, you're dealing 2 extra damage. So she has the flexibility to shift away from the confuse, whereas like Miles has stunned, confused, and I think Miles is more hurt by the stalwart villains than Psylocke is here, because Psylocke has the flexibility to change the quote change the confuse into a different effect. And so I have not, or same thing that you, I have not necessarily found that stalwart is as big of a hindrance as I was expecting it to be.
yeah, it's interesting with Miles because he is just so strong still.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Psylocke has been really interesting for that. I think the Thanos matchup is quite interesting as well because she's got that. We haven't even mentioned it. She basically with the katanas. I don't think we mentioned it. Basically, with the katanas, she has permanent piercing, and he
Yep.
has a lot of toughs, and so do the minions. And another thing which I found interesting is if she gets stunned or confused, depends if you're running them and which ones you're running. But she has access to the new telepathy and telekinesis cards, which can be used to, get rid of those for relatively cheap if you've got power of the mind, for example, or too many resources. So I'm curious what your thoughts are actually on the telekinesis and telepathy aspect, sort of basic cards that came with her.
I I do not like them. I don't necessarily know if they are bad. I do not like them. Uh, they are the ones where you have to spend 2 mental resources. I think telekinesis is the threat.
That's the damage.
Dang, I had a 50-50 shot. I honestly didn't know. I was just like, maybe. But yeah, so 2 resources for 3 damage, or 2 mental resources for 2 threat removal. And these are resource sinks. And she has the ability to, with Power the Mind, when you're doubling for a Sana card, which both of these are. So you can Power the Mind into these. You can use her knives to generate these. But I like the damage one more than I like the threat removal one. I find that I have found that just keeping her knives out, using her 3 thwart is enough threat reduction along with her mental detection events. I have a lot of threat removal in her kit, and then I can use kind of those sinks more for the 3 damage. And I think that I use those to clear minions, and I'll run those in like our justice and maybe protection builds. But I have found that the threat removal one, the 2 for 2, has not necessarily been worth it. Maybe in aggression, but still, like I don't see myself really running that as much. Well, no, actually, I will say that I'm running them more than I thought I would. When I first saw the cards, I did not like them, and I, like any card that I don't like, played it, and I have been enjoying the damage one more than I was expecting. But the thwart one probably is not making it into many of my decks. What about you?
That's really interesting. Again, I'm surprised, and again, we've had similar experiences. I also much prefer the damage one. At the moment, I'm basically including that and not telepathy, the forwarding one. Telekinesis, I just really like it. And I think what it allows you to do is really aggressively run the basic doubles and the power of the mind. And you'll always
Mm,
have a sync for the power of the mind, or even genius, if you can't
yeah,
spend that somehow, which is really useful when you start in hero form. And, you can just have too many resources. And again, yeah, I think she has so much threat removal. My favorite way again has been that repurpose deck, which also has 3 copies of What Doesn't Kill You. I've been running, so she can get free forwarding, on her own. So you just ready her up to another free forwarding. I don't need to pay 2 resources to get 2 threat removal, but I will happily pay for extra damage because that's always going to have a good place to go until you win the game.
nice, cool. What about power? Because I've heard people talking about Psylocke, and I think that Psylocke in a solo setting is really powerful. I think that she has a lot going for her. She's flexible. She's got that confuse, and she can confuse lock to infinity. And then if you throw some stun in there, that, I mean, it's a really, really powerful way to play. But what are your thoughts on power level for Psylocke?
Yeah, I actually agree. I think she's been more powerful than I expected. And I expected her to be pretty good. I did all that Reddit review series where I did a deep dive into the previews. And I think basically every X-Force character ended up like, they're going to be top 15. But I think Psylocke has ended up a little bit higher than I expected. And yeah, she just has so much flexibility in terms of her stats. Her events can be flexible of using. This is why I have a problem with the names of these cards. Mental detection.
Yeah.
I love using that one just for card draw, and you can cycle to find an option you need
Hmm.
if you don't need
Hmm.
the forwarding. So I think that's really powerful. I do think Angel is the more powerful one, and I just think that's because he's less reliant on going alter ego. And I do think there's still some inherent risk in solo with that. You're trying to find answers, and again, stalwart, steady. I don't find steady to be a big problem for Psylocke because she does have that much confused. But yeah, I do think Psylocke is good. I think for me, I wouldn't rule top 10 out, but I do think she's more in that, still in the top 15 range, but looking very strong in that regard. I do think she is in the top 15.
Yeah. I think she is where I've been playing her and how I've been experiencing. They feel very close to each other in terms of power for me. Psylocke has, and then they're different, which is kind of cool. Like they're powerful for different reasons, which I enjoy. I think that she is a little bit easier to pilot than Angel is in terms of like figuring out how to, be good. Confuse, flip down. You can come up with some of these crazy cerebro karma interactions, and that makes her like really, really powerful. But I think, just the confuse, flip, 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 flip is a powerful way to play, and you can have success in just doing that and focusing on her cards. And so I think that Psylocke is really interesting. I do think that she falls off, and I have this is speculation. I have no concrete evidence and I have not tried this, but I want to talk to you about multiplayer now because I feel like Angel is the better multiplayer hero, whereas Psylocke struggles more as play count increases because Confused is less valuable as player count increases. That's my thought. I'm hoping to run a two-handed game of Psylocke later today, but what do you think about her as in a multiplayer setting?
I'm glad you brought that up because I have played more two-player and even a couple of three-player games, and I have played quite a few solo, but I don't think it. I think it pales in comparison to the amount of solo games you have played, and I found her to be really good in multiplayer. I think a little bit like the Star Wars thing. She isn't missing out too much on the Confused because she can have those events do other things, but the Confused is more profitable, so there is an impact there. But again, I think we've been playing in her in protection a lot and using the karma trick. I found that to be incredibly powerful. And then readying up Professor X with Psychic Kicker. I think that's too much threat removal for solo, but again, multiplayer, I think it's really good. So she does have good options there. I do think I agree with you, though. I think in solo, I don't know if I agree. You know what? I think Angel's really strong. I think Angel is maybe slightly more powerful in solo and multiplayer. That is going to be my take.
And I what I was saying is that I think Angel is stronger in both of those. I think that the power discrepancy in solo is less than in multiplayer. I think Psylocke falls off more in multiplayer to top 15. Like not she's not like a D tier hero, right? But I think that they are closer in power in solo, but when you take a look at like higher player count 3-4 player, Angel is going to maintain that power where Psylocke's ability and kind of what she's built around falls off a little bit.
I'm really in two minds because I do think Psylocke has a lot of good stuff she can do, and she doesn't have to confuse the villain, which is also interesting in multiplayer. Although you can
That's
normally
true.
handle the minions, but I don't know, float like a butterfly in. I guess anyone can bring free copies of it, but she has that guaranteed confuse. Like if you play that on other people, you can start to really be consistent. And I really do love that Professor X loop in multiplayer as well, because you're always going
Yeah,
to hit that block. You're never going to miss the block from Professor X. Like
that's
if you
true.
fall down, I don't know. I kind of feel like I'm gonna say I think they stay about around the same power, respectively,
Okay,
in solo and multiplayer. But I don't
cool.
I don't like largely disagree, and I do still think I need to play more of them to get like a definitive opinion from my perspective. But yeah, interesting points though. Definitely the confuse is a little bit less useful. It will depend on your group because if your group is not bringing a lot of confuse, your confuses are still always going to be landing.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's close this out before we hop into some of the questions that we have. Who of these two, Angel or Psylocke, do you enjoy playing more?
It is Psylocke, I think. By honestly, I like Angel more than I thought, but I also like Psylocke more than I thought. So I'm gonna say Psylocke by quite a fairly significant amount.
Okay. I agree with that. I think I enjoy Psylocke more than I do Angel. I've played a lot more Angel than I have Psylocke. I've been focusing on Angel just because that skill, and I needed to get some reps in before I do his review. I needed to get more reps to kind of get a better understanding, and I'll do the Psylocke reps here in a bit. But I really am enjoying Psylocke. I think that she's been just an incredibly fun hero, and yeah, Psylocke takes it from me.
Yeah, I think that's actually really interesting. Going back to an older point you said, is that you thought Psylocke was a little bit easier and Angel was a little bit more difficult to get, that sequencing and get everything down. We have found the opposite here. I think my partner
Interesting.
said
Okay.
to me, she said to me like I think it was yesterday or the day before, she was surprised how complex Psylocke seemed and that she was finding, even more complicated than Domino, whereas Angel seems to have clicked with her straight away. And I don't think I've found Psylocke overly difficult, but I've definitely had to think through my turns very carefully. And a bit like what you actually said with Domino, I really love this point that you brought up last time, where you said you felt a sense of, sort of progress, like you could see yourself getting better with her. And I have actually felt that with Psylocke, which has been really
Oh,
cool.
cool. Yeah.
But yeah, I just think I love all those options with Psylocke. I think it's really dynamic how everything interacts with everything. Her basic attack will change her weapons. Her weapon stats affect her basic attack, but the weapons also generate resources for events, which can change based on what her weapons are in. So everything talks to everything, and that just
Yeah.
is really satisfying for me.
That's awesome. Very cool. Very cool. Let's hop into some of the community questions to finish out the episode.
Yeah, and we're running a little bit short on time, so let's do one each. And I will say, if your question isn't answered here, we haven't forgotten them. They won't be lost to time. We will keep them, and hopefully, we will get time next time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a question. This is from Junicup 1041. Can weak heroes ever beat tougher villains? Villain theory.
I would say yes. Now, it depends what you mean by tougher villain, but I have seen Hulk take out Expert to Ronan. So anything is possible. And I think when you get to the really tough villains, I think one of the best strategies can often be Rush, which some of the quote unquote weaker heroes are actually quite good at because they tend to be damage and not a lot else but damage. So you might not win as consistently as a strong hero, but you can definitely beat them.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. One of the things I prefaced my tier list that I just recently put out with is that I don't necessarily think there are, quote, bad heroes in the game. When they are looked at in comparison to some of the better heroes, yes, they are worse than the better heroes. Hulk is worse than Doctor Strange. That's in an all around standpoint. Hulk can rush better, which leads into what you were just saying. That being said, I think any hero can beat any villain with the right deck build, the right piloting, and the right, maybe just a little bit amount of luck. It's just how easy are those wins going to come? Doctor Strange is going to get some of those wins easier than Valkyrie is going to get those wins. But yes, absolutely they can.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, it is a card game. Luck is involved. And, if I'm playing Valkyrie and my Nemesis comes up, it's not necessarily game over, but against Expert Ronan, it probably is.
I It is game over for me because that's when I flip the table.
That's a good point. That's when I tear up the cards. No, no. Um, I'm going to ask the question that was sent in by Weathertops 4368. We definitely have a numbers theme going on here. And they ask, how do you feel about new releases being leaked on social media weeks before they're released?
Ooh, what a banger of a question, Weathertops. I this has been something that's been generating a lot of buzz recently, and I think it's a very topical question because we got the leaks of Deadpool and X-23. All of those cards are out now, and you can see those in the packs. And they're not slated to release until I think about a month and a half from now, which is, I think, hurting the game overall. I think that there is a level of hype that comes with that release day opening packs where people see some of the cards that have not been spoiled and not been released and getting these a month and a half early. A lot of the chatter is happening early or it's not happening in the same time frame, which can cause less overall hype at one time. And so I don't like it. I really do not like people. I'm not saying that I don't like it when people get the packs early, because if you can get the packs early and you're having fun with that, that's great. I think as an overall to the game, I think that it does hurt the game from a community standpoint. Does that make any sense? Did I say anything there?
I think so. I mean, I know what you mean. And I think I mostly agree. As someone who likes to build decks, I do feel pressure, once cards are spoiled to look at them, study them, and some people even will, proxy them, playtest them early, basically. And I would much rather wait and just play them when they're released, and get to discover them. Normally in a group, we do it here. I definitely feel pressure to keep up on that end. And actually, with Angel and Psylocke, I basically, at the time of recording, I haven't posted a single deck for them just because there's 6 of them pop up already made and tested within an hour of them coming online on Marvel CDB. It does in some ways divide, the people who have, already looked at it all in detail and then those who haven't. I definitely think the hype is a factor. I'm not really sure how it would be in some parts of the community, let's say, Facebook, which I don't use. But, I know from Discord, for example, there's definitely some talk from those who are well into it, and then there's the people trying to avoid it. And I think that's a little bit unfortunate. It is tricky. It's one of those things with physical releases. They are going to get mixed up. I don't think we've ever had a pack that hasn't been leaked early. So yeah, a tricky topic. I'd prefer if it wasn't, but I don't know if there's already a way to stop that. So
yeah. And Yeah, it is what it is, and we have gotten them early, but I think historically a lot of those early packs have been a week or two, not 6 to 8 weeks early, which I think changes a little bit. I think getting them a little bit early and just starting to build that hype, because one of the things that I really like about these card games is opening the new cards and seeing them for the first time, and I feel like a lot of people don't get to do that. But yeah, it is what it is. But that I feel like that was a downer. Let's end on a high note. Let's end on a happy note. Let's do one more question. And what do you prefer the game to play, true solo or two-handed? This is from Bryn12. I found a lot of the content creators in this space prefer to play true solo, which surprises me. Do you prefer true solo, two-handed, multiplayer?
So I think I've said this maybe on the previous episode, but I prefer to play with actually two people. I think two people is a really good number, and failing that, two-handed. I just think you get the depth of being able to specialize a bit more of each hero. You're not worried too much about trying to cover everything. Get some cool inter-hero interactions, but it doesn't take too long. 3 and 4 player does take significantly longer. I mean, even 2 player takes significantly longer than solo. Let's be honest, but I just find that's a really good sweet spot where things interact and all the scenarios seem to be at the actual sweet spot of intended difficulty and kind of flow. So I do prefer primarily 2 player, then two-handed. Then I would say solo, then I would say 3 player. To be honest, 3 player and solo are pretty close. I do like a lot of aspects of both. I think solo
Yeah.
is nice. You can just knock out a quick game. And there is something exciting about everything being on you. You are the hero. So I do
Yeah.
enjoy those parts. And you get to use different cards when you go into bigger player counts. But
hmm
yeah, 2 players where I'm at. What about
Yeah.
you?
I do the majority of my plays in true solo. I would say 98% of my plays in this game are true solo. That being said, I have started playing in the last, I don't know, 4 months two-handed, and I vastly prefer two-handed plays. I think that the game is more dynamic and interesting. The deck builds the same way. There's just a lot more going on. I think the game was designed for multi heroes at the table. True solo is easier to get to the table. It's easier to play. It's quicker to play. And also, when I'm doing content, when I'm live streaming, there's already a lot going on. And I don't feel that I'm comfortable enough with two-handed in order to live stream the two-handed plays. And that's why that's one of the reasons I stick to true solo. The other thing is that the majority of the community actually plays true solo. In every single poll that I've played, it's been about 50 to 60% of the community, their most played solo or their most played player count is true solo. And so there's a lot going on, but the more that I play two-handed, the more I enjoy that more. The more I enjoy that more. Nice. English is fun. The
I'll
the
leave
the
that
better
in.
I enjoy that. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Leave that in. The more I enjoy it, and what I think that boils down to is that this game is different at different player counts, and it can be just as satisfying playing true solo. It can be very satisfying playing 4 player, and they play differently. It feels different when you're playing at these different player counts, which is something I think really special about the game.
Yeah, and one actually other thing I just quickly want to add. I like to build a fresh deck almost every time, unless I'm like testing one to publish. So it's a lot easier to build one deck for solo play than it is two
Yeah,
for 2 players. So that is actually another factor. Kind of fits into the time, but that is something else I think. It's easier to go between games and set up in true solo.
awesome. Thank you, Bryn, for that question.
Yes, thank you everyone for those questions. If your question didn't get answered, it might do in the next episode. And if you want to send any more questions in, please do. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can comment on the video. If you prefer to email, you can reach us at shadowofthecast@gmail.com. And thank you so much for listening. I think next time we're going to go back to the past. We're going to maybe borrow some
Yeah.
of Cable's
Shadow of the
power.
past.
Oh, yeah. Shadow of the Cast is going back to Shadow of the Past. Um, did you want to tell the people a little bit more about that, Nelson?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the first team that we ever got in Marvel Champions is the Avengers. So, next episode, we are going to revisit the Avengers. Where are they at today? Are they still a viable team? Are there any things that's kind of made them better or more fun to play in the subsequent releases past the Avenger wave? So, we're going to be revisiting that old set, taking a look at the heroes and some of the cards there. And it's going to be fun. I'm really pumped because some of the Avengers are still my favorite heroes to play.
Yeah, it's going to be really exciting. I love a lot of the Avengers, so looking forward to getting into that. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.